coming around the country now. You're one of the first meetings I've sort of called of local members to travel around the country and to talk to people and to tell people what our vision and what our dream is. And if you're here, then you're probably slightly, at least, aligned with us. What is our vision and our dream? I want to uproot the current political class. I want to do nothing less than to uproot the current political class. And it can be done. It absolutely can be done. One of the great, one of the things that holds back the people, when the people start to see that their government is corrupt in every which way. I'm not just talking about financially corrupt, I'm talking about corrupt in every which way. They're saying things that don't even make any sense anymore. They are bringing in laws and introducing legislation which is quite obviously at our expense, and yet they continue to do it. So if you have, for example, if we take an example, a very obvious example, if you have the Rotherham and elsewhere, Rotherham, Telford and elsewhere, rape gangs, and we know who's doing this, and yet our government continues to allow people from the same demographic group to come into the country. Meanwhile, our police, which do nothing at all about the gang rape of underage English girls all over the country, are busying themselves on Twitter or dealing with absurdities like misgendering. We all know this is insanity. We all know it's insane. And the purpose of For Britain is to say, enough. We've had enough. This is ridiculous. We can't take this anymore. The whole country is alert to this. It's alert to this. There's no mystery here. The only people who don't seem to be aware of it are the politicians and the mainstream media. Although they actually are aware of it, they're just in deep, deep denial. And they're holding us back ever so slightly, I guess, is not quite the right term to use, but they're holding us back without purpose, there's no truth to any of this, there's no honesty to any of this. They're holding us back with a sieve, if you like, a sieve. There's no holding back what's really going to happen now. And what's going to happen now, the next 20 years in this country are going to be very, very different to the last 20 years. They really are. And people keep telling me, oh, I like For Britain, I like what you're saying, but we live in a first-past-the-post system, you're never going to succeed. Nonsense. 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 The Labour Party itself came from nowhere and was in government within a couple of decades through the first-past-the-post system. Before that, it was the Liberals and the Tories. And if you look very much closer to home, in 2015, up in Scotland, and nobody seems as shocked about this as I was. Nobody seems as shocked about this as I was. Labour dominated Scotland. Dominated Scotland. For generations, Labour was Scotland. And in one night like that, the SNP didn't just take 1 or 2 seats from Labour, they wiped Labour out in Scotland. My thinking is, if they can wipe Labour out, if Labour can be wiped out in Scotland, under the first-past-the-post system, remember, under the first-past-the-post system, if Labour can be wiped out in Scotland, Labour can be wiped out in the north of England, Labour can be wiped out in the Midlands, Labour can be wiped out wherever Labour currently dominates. It is doable. And Scotland only 3 years ago showed us that it's doable, even under the first-past-the-post system. And let's not forget other options that we have. I had a phone call with someone today, a supporter of ours, who was phoning from Scotland to remind me that even if we do have a UK Parliament with first-past-the-post, what we also have are assemblies within the 4 corners of the UK. So the Scottish Assembly, the Scottish Parliament, excuse me, and the Welsh Assembly are all elected not on first-past-the-post. And if we put some energy there and some interest there, we can start to win some seats. We can also start to win some seats this May. Now, do I Let me explain how I feel about this May, because as you know, we're running only 15 candidates nationwide in the May elections this year. I'm frankly delighted with those 15 candidates. We were registered with the Electoral Commission on the 8th of March. It's now what, the 16th, 18th of April. It's what, 6 weeks? And we've already been standing candidates. So it might not have been the best idea in the world. It might not have been the best idea in the world. It could have been a better idea for us to say, no, we won't stand anyone this May. It's too soon. But I had too many interested and keen members, desperate to get going. And part of my job as leader is to grab enthusiasm and morale and you know, to up morale, to increase morale is the word I'm looking for, rather than decrease morale. So I had to say, yes, let's do it. And what it does, it gives us a great opportunity to advertise ourselves. Great opportunity to advertise. And having said that, we may do quite well in this. We may do quite well. I'm hearing scary stories from the doorstep. I am. Scary in the good. I mean, people know about us. People are talking about us. Someone sent me an email saying I was standing in a post office depot in rural Cambridgeshire, and the two people in front of me in the queue were talking about For Britain and how they were going to vote for Britain if they had any. Things are happening. I'm getting recognised in the street more and more. I was recognised today again. Usually, and I have to say, and if the guy is watching this, if he does get to watch this, sorry. He asked me, are you Anne-Marie Waters? I said, no. I do tend to say that because, especially if I'm by myself, it's like a gut instinct thing. I'm by myself, I don't know who this person is, I have to say no. But they know, because we kind of laugh to each other, because he knows I'm lying, and I know he knows I'm lying, and you know, it's just that little bit of protection I've got for myself, which is pretty much worthless at this point. But we are growing. You might have heard Morrissey yesterday, and that's the second time he's given us a pretty good endorsement. He's given us a pretty good endorsement. The first time was after the end of the UKIP leadership election, when at a concert of his, he said, it had been fixed. I had been basically cheated out of the UKIP leadership. And yesterday, he said, I'm going to be responding to him tomorrow, by the way. I shall do an open letter to him in the morning, telling him how right he is about some things and how he needs to know even more about other things. But this is incredible. I mean, this is incredible. We have we've been running for about 7 or 8 months. We have everything against us. We have the establishment against us, obviously. We have the mainstream media against us, obviously. And everywhere, we are described as far right. And we're described as far right for one simple reason only. It's because we say not positive things about Islam. You can be as left, I'll come to you. You can be as left wing can be. You can be a Marxist NHS welfare benefit state. You can be the whole, I'm not, but I am NHS. But you can be a complete lefty. But all you have to do is to say something negative about Islam, and suddenly you become far right. I want to say a couple of things about Birmingham and the West Midlands. Things that ought to be infuriating people who live in Birmingham and the West Midlands. It's reflective of the rest of the country. I say it all the time. I don't know why we're putting up with this. I don't know why we're putting up with this. But let's have a look at a few of the core things that a government needs to get right. I'm a person who thinks you get the basics right and you've done your job. And this is what we've got. This is what's wrong. Government has stopped getting the basics right. And the basics are essentially employment, policing, defence, schooling, healthcare, welfare when and fairly when it's needed, But if you get those right, and then leave the people to get on with their lives in freedom, that to me is the government's job. Get the basics right, and you'll be okay. And what's wrong with the current government, and we're going back generations here, and you can see that they're not getting the basics right, and you can see it reflected in their continuing legislation. Now, legislation is something a government does when it has no idea what to do. It's true, it's true. If we enforce the laws we had written, some of them back in the late 1800s, for example, the Offences Against the Person Act, which came in the late 1800s, we wouldn't have to have an FGM Act. We would be going with the Offences Against the Person Act. We already have the laws we need. Exactly, and many, many more, and many, many more. We already have the laws we need. The problem is that the government doesn't have the guts to enforce those laws. And it makes itself look like it's doing something by bringing in more and more and more laws. So the compliant media will report the government has made a new law on this, this, and this, and then the public will think, oh, they're working on that. I can go back to my daily job. And I don't blame the public for this, because this is life. People get on with their daily lives. They have jobs to do, they have mortgages to pay, they have kids to raise. And this is how the government gets away with it. Because the media does the compliant thing of only putting out what the government wants to. And it's not a conspiracy theory. I'm not some crazy, it's real. We can all see it. It's how it works. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's how it works. It's how it always works. But it doesn't have to be how it always will work. And I am trying to do something enormous. I am trying to do something enormous. But I will not back down. I think we can do it. I literally want to change the entire machine that runs this country. I want to change that. And the reason I think we can, is because the vote is actually what controls everything. And again, I'm going to go back to George Orwell's 1984. Or maybe I haven't mentioned that this evening, but I usually do. In George Orwell's 1984, he talks about the proles. If there is hope, it lies with the proles. And the proles is if you've read the book, it's basically, we're living in it. I've got a book coming out in the next few weeks, by the way, plug. My first book, Beyond Terror, is coming out in a few weeks. And one of the chapters in that book, I've called it 1984 because it's my favorite book. It's absolutely miraculous. The man was a genius in how he predicted human behavior and how we would behave. And it's all there. It's all there. We don't have the telescreens, but we do have the technology for the telescreens. But the major thing that we have now, which is written in 1984, is the rewriting of history, the rewriting of reality. What we see with our own eyes is not truth. What the state tells us is true. That's what's true. And if what we see with our own eyes conflicts with what the state tells us, then we're wrong, and we're committing an offense. And this is the world that we're living in. This is the world that we're living in. So when government tells us things, we should take it with a pinch of salt. And we should look instead at the evidence that's around us. I want to talk about those basics that we're getting wrong, and to bring them home here to Birmingham. In 2017, just to give you a clue or an example, in 2017, Birmingham was the unemployment capital of the UK. The Tory announcements that year, and I'm not here to go after the Tories, I'm here to go after the whole lot of them. They're all as bad as each other. The Tory announcements about falling unemployment in 2017 were a nonsense, because they did not take into account at all 0 hours contracts. They didn't take into account at all stagnant wages, low pay, part-time jobs. People who are barely struggling to get by were counted as a rise in employment. And even in that context, even in that scenario, Birmingham was still the unemployment capital of the UK in 2017. Crime was up in 2017, you won't be surprised to hear, across the West Midlands, crime was up. There were some areas within the West Midlands in which it was down, but in the vast majority of them, it was up. 78% up in February this year. 78% crime was up in some areas of the West Midlands. I think that's actually a shocking statistic. Don't you agree? An absolutely shocking statistic. In March 2018, homelessness in Birmingham was the highest has ever been recorded. In March 2018, homelessness was the highest it's ever been recorded. Now, Birmingham is the largest local authority in the whole of Europe. It has a budget of about £3 billion a year. It has also, now keep in mind, unemployment the highest in the country in 2017. Homelessness, highest it has ever been recorded in Birmingham last year. And crime up staggering percentages in areas across the city. Meanwhile, 23 unelected officials on Birmingham City Council were paid over £100,000 a year. The chief executive of Birmingham City Council took home £185,000 a year. And to put that into some sort of context, the average nurse in the UK takes home £26,000, and the average police officer takes home £30,000. This is across the board. This is across the board. It's not just Birmingham City Council, it's Wolverhampton, it's Coventry, it's Dudley, it is across the board. To give you just a couple, I'll move on from statistics. I like to give some statistics, but I usually like to talk around them. There are hospitals, hospitals in the West Midlands have, over the last few years, and in February 2018, the hospital in Coventry was fined £105,800. That's in February this year, fined for not living up to its obligations in terms of waiting times. Now, how one feels about that is a difficult subject. What good is it to fine a hospital already on its last legs financially, to fine them £105,000 for not for not bringing their waiting times down? Clearly, they can't afford to bring their waiting times down. So the idea that you would fine them 6 figures to bring their waiting times down is an absurdity.
What needs to happen is somebody needs to be sacked. Yeah. That's what needs to happen.
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
But nobody's got the guts to
What springs to mind to you when you have a city with the highest homelessness it's ever known, unemployment through the roof, the NHS hospitals, their waiting times are so bad they're being fined by their own bodies, which is so bizarre. What does it tell you? What does all of this tell you? It tells me we're being run by, I can't say the word, we're being run by people who don't know what they are doing. And this is across the board. What kind of person thinks it's a good idea to charge a struggling hospital £100,000 in fine for not doing what they can't afford to do? All of it funded by the state. We're being run by idiots. We're being run by idiots. And we're being run by idiots on 6-figure salaries. This is what For Britain is here to do. This is what I'm here to do. I don't want to go out and but it's infuriating. It's infuriating. Decent people are going out and going to work, getting up every morning, the clock is going off, they're getting up, getting the bus, going to work, paying their taxes, for it to be spent on this. This is crazy. This is crazy. And it's not the Labour Party, it's the Labour Party and the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, and they're all as useless as each other. They are all as useless as each other. And I know I'm not the only person who thinks this. And one of the reasons I'm so convinced that I can read, I have this weird little thing that I believe I can read public opinion. And the reason I think I can read public opinion is because I am public opinion. And I remember Margaret Thatcher saying this in one of her books. She said, I know what the public is thinking because it's what I'm thinking. And if I'm thinking it, if I'm sitting here watching the news go, oh, come on, then there must be millions thinking exactly the same thing. This is it. This is it. We are the ordinary majority. And we're sick of listening to this tripe. I mean, give me a break. It's one thing after another, and it's one stupid decision after another. I mean, look, we're bound to have differing views on what's happening with Syria at the moment, for example. But for crying out loud, without knowing who the hell is involved in what, we've started blowing things up again. We started bringing British troops in essentially by air, fine, not by land. But what are we doing? What are we doing? Have we learned nothing at all? Have we learned nothing at all? What I want is a responsible government, one that isn't enmeshed in the political game. And politics is a game. And when you are in politics like me, and you hate politics like me, you can stand back and objectively watch politics, and it's poison. It's poison. I remember, and I'm not endorsing Tony Blair in any way when I say this, but he did make a great comment.
Well, he's bound to have made one.
He's bound to have made one. In his very last speech in the Commons, he said that politics was a place of both low skullduggery and the pursuit of noble causes. Now, that is a great thing to say about politics. It pretty much sums it up very, very well. But the low skullduggery, to me, is far more powerful than the noble causes. Because the low skullduggery has no morals. It doesn't have a base. It doesn't have a place it says stop. And politics is a place of lying, of cheating, and of political positioning. It's like a chess game. And you have major global leaders playing chess, but with every piece they move is potentially hundreds of thousands of human lives. It is potentially poverty for working classes. It is potentially transition, a complete transformation of a nation state, a particular nation state. These people are playing chess, but thousands upon thousands of people, their lives are being adjusted for their chess game.
Many of them are driven by personal development.
Well, they are, because politics is an industry. It's an industry. You can see the two big parties that dominate, Labour and the Tories, and most of their MPs are career politicians. And it's a common phrase to use, but no one ever really explains what's meant by career politician. A career politician is essentially a person who joined the party at 15 or 16, worked their way up through the constituency, the branch level, the constituency level, made a lot of friends at constituency level, saw a particular seat that might have an old MP in it, or might have a marginal vote in it, and they'll round on it like vultures. You can see them coming in like vultures on a particular parliamentary seat. And it's a career. It's a career. And they know little, if anything, outside of going from the age of 16 through the party ranks to some senior position in the party, and then into MP, or a parliamentary assistant, and then into MP. That is who we're governed by. Some would argue that that's just the way of the world. I would perhaps agree that it is the way of the world if we do nothing about it. If we do nothing about it.
Don't you think that they're trying to, this whole poverty business, keeping people on the poverty level and keeping people having to work so many hours a day, is just their way of stopping us all from stopping and thinking?
Well, yes, it certainly works. It certainly works, and it understandably works, because most people prioritise their children. And when you prioritise your children, you prioritise putting a roof over their head. And that means you prioritise your job. And you don't want anything to come in and ruin your children's lives. So they certainly bank on this. And once again, I'm not suggesting some massive conspiracy. I'm simply saying how politics works, and that is how it works. And governments do depend on the fact that people will not spend a great deal of time researching the political message of parties. one of the reasons, and I completely take that on board, and one of the reasons I want us to be so succinct and so on the point and so on the ball is because people don't have hours to give us. They're not going to have hours to give us. And one of the reasons, and this is one of the reasons behind the 10-point plan, which I hope you've seen, which basically sums up who we are in plain English and doesn't require hours of reading by people. And when you're going to do that, then you have to get your wording. You have to get your wording has to grab people's attention. And one of the things I'm criticised for is being a little bit too how shall I say it?
Feisty.
What's that?
Feisty.
Feisty is probably very flattering, Paul. A Nazi is probably the lower end of it. Look.
Interesting for people that don't understand it.
Well, quite. Thank you. But it is. I mean, we're not here to have an academic debate about the nuances of this and that. And the left loves academic debate because it keeps them in the lecture halls where they're familiar with. But out here in the real world, they don't like it. And the reason they don't like it is because it's when the real world that you have to put this stuff into practice. And when you have to put it into practice, then the decisions get tough. And you'll find that you will have conflicting interests. Now, the lefties, being as you know, this sort of super moral fascists that they are, what they do is present the world as if it is a utopia, that everyone can be happy at the same time. And if you don't agree, then you're a nasty piece of work. But this is utterly ridiculous. You cannot have a world without conflicting interests. That's how it works. That's reality. The world has conflicting interests. So if we take for a moment and this is something I talk about a lot, the mass migration into Europe from the Middle East and Africa that has happened. It's been steadily dripping in for years, but it's enjoyed a particular explosion, as we all know, when Chancellor Merkel opened the border in 2015. And she didn't open the border to Germany, she opened the border to Europe. And everyone knows it and everyone knew it at the time. A lot of speculation, actually, about why did she do this? She'd been Chancellor for a long time. She's generally a Europhile, which was probably an understatement to call her a Europhile. But why did she consult nobody about opening the German borders at that time? Considering she was such a Europhile, it seems odd that she actually did this of her own volition and opened the borders of Germany, knowing full well. And she invited the whole world to come here. We know this. And she knew full well what would happen. It seems odd to me that she would suddenly do this, and she did do it quite suddenly. But in any case, my own theory is that the establishment is waking up to the fact that the Europeans were waking up, and they had to speed up the process somewhat of migration. Seriously, I'm not a conspiracy, but it's a theory, and one I think is probably very legitimate. So we have this mass migration coming from the Middle East and North Africa, and we are being asked in Europe to tone down, to compromise, to essentially give up values that people have fought for hundreds and hundreds of years. We are being told this by a corrupt, unelectable, because the EU is entirely involved in this, and we have to, you know, I say this over and over again, and I'm delighted to see that it's gaining ground. I'm getting more and more contact about this one particular policy, and that is getting rid of the European Union. Getting rid of it altogether. I think more and more people are realizing that in order for any of us to be free of the European Union has to go. It has to go. Let's say we got out of the EU in 2020. What then? What then? We're going to be an independent country. Great. That's what I want. It's a first step. but we're going to be relatively small, although for our size, punching above our weight militarily and economically and otherwise, but relatively geographically small out on the outskirts of mainland Europe. And what we will have on our doorstep, and France is only over the road, let's not forget. What we will have on our doorstep is a totalitarian, pan-Europe state with an army.
Yeah, but they won't have money.
With an army. Oh, they will have money. There's still money in Europe. There's still money. There'll be a lot of money missing. There'll be a lot of money missing because the UK is the big cash cow. We all know that. We all know that. But maybe they'll just up the taxes on everyone else and to make up for the money they'll be missing. I agree. But we will still. Here's the best case scenario in 2022, say. Best case scenario is that the UK is independent and we have on our doorstep France is only over the road, as I said. We can't get rid of Europe. We can't cut our minds. We can't cut away the rest of the world. It still matters. So best case scenario is that we are a very powerful, very rich, but still sole standing on the edges of Europe with a totalitarian, pan-European, increasingly Islamic state on our doorstep. Are you happy? I'm not. The EU has to go. The EU has to go. We can never, none of us can be free without the EU being completely destroyed. And it can happen. It can happen. Again, and maybe am I a dreamer? I am an eternal optimist. I am an eternal optimist. It's how I stay relatively sane. Relatively sane. But I am an eternal optimist. But I look at history. I'm a history fanatic. And I read history. I've read history for hundreds of years. I haven't read it for hundreds of years. I've read it over hundreds of years. And you will see that there come times when real change happens. You'll have a long period of sameness, and then something extraordinary will happen. And it'll be written in the history books. And in the last century, 2 earth-changing events happened in Europe alone. The First World War and the Second World War. And that's only the 2 biggest of major continent-changing developments that happened in the last 100 years. The progress of human life is speeding up. Things are changing. And I honestly believe now is the time. Now is the time. The British people are, I think, more pro-Brexit than they were on the 23rd of June 2016. Because they've seen, since that, what a bully the European Union actually is. They could have shaken our hands on the 24th and said, fair play, all the best, let's make this as painless as we can, we're all grown-ups. But they didn't. They decided to punish us, and they're punishing because we are not getting out of the European Union based on this vote. We're not. And this is being recorded, so I'm hoping it'll age, but I really do believe that. There's no way we're getting out on this vote. It's going to drag on and on and on. And I honestly, there is a growing movement across Europe to bring the whole corrupt thing crashing down and restore the European nation state. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Now, there's no one in Britain at this time to pick up that wave. No political party to do it. That's where we come in. That's where we come in. I'm serious.
Broadcasting what the other European Union countries fear. Slovakia, Hungary, nobody is broadcasting that they are so unhappy with what is happening.
Well, the Western media doesn't want the Western people to know that they've got backup in the East, but they do. There's no denying it. You can only, like I said earlier, they're holding it back with a sieve. There is no going back from this now. The people have had enough. We are watching Europe turn into a third world nightmare. We are watching the Greek islands, for example. You know, these are places of old European mythology. That's how far, you know, this how old this is. And yet I've seen videos of people on islands, on the Greek islands, their houses where migrants just came in and just opened the door and walked into the house. I've seen, you know, this is disgraceful. This is disgraceful. Italy, Sicily, beautiful Sicily, overrun. We don't have any idea what's really going on. And still, to this day, thousands come into Europe every single day. And as for Germany, I lived in Germany when I was 20. And I was an au pair there. And every weekend, well, only weekend I wasn't looking after the kids, I would go off to a different city in Germany and do my bit of touring. This was 20 years ago. I visited almost every city in Germany in the space of about 6 months. Except Munich, for some reason. I never went to Munich. I don't know why that was. I would not do that today. I would not do that today. And I don't think a 20-year-old woman on her own would be safe to travel around the train stations of Germany today. Now, that's a huge, huge jump in only 2 decades to say that in the late 90s, early noughties, a young woman could go around Germany by herself. I never felt unsafe. Never felt unsafe.
Anne-Marie, do you feel safe in East London?
I don't go to East London very much, but probably no.
I was there 5
Probably
6
no.
weeks ago and I didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm a big ugly bloke.
I would avoid it. Therefore, that's pretty much the answer to the question. But there's absolutely no way. You know, we're changing this continent beyond all recognition. And I don't. I do know what to say because I know exactly what the public needs to hear, which is that we mean what we say. I mean every word I'm saying. I would not put myself through this if I didn't mean it. Now, everyone who joins For Britain is doing it out of genuine passion, genuine concern for this country. And I know this. Now, I have absolutely no doubt. It terrifies me. It terrifies me. But I have no doubt we're going to succeed. I have no doubt we're going to succeed. I can't see anyone coming anywhere close. And this is not about me. I'm not blowing my own horn. I'm talking about us. I'm talking about the message we have, which is and let me talk a little bit about political positioning for a minute, because unfortunately this is the world that we live in. So we need to look at the political market and see what gaps need to be filled and whether we can fill them or not. This is another reason. This is political strategy. We've gone away from morals and ethics now and into political strategy. I believe we have also got the right political strategy. The political message is absolutely spot on. And there are a couple of gaps in the market. One, immigration. No, who's talking about immigration?
Only us.
Even UKIP isn't talking about immigration. Even UKIP isn't talking about immigration. So let's clear it up. Let's clear it up. I don't want, and I gave this message yesterday on my webcast, I don't want Caribbean immigrants who came here 50 years ago completely legally and have done nothing wrong in all that time thrown out. I mean, what's going on here? What makes them think that that's what the public wants? These people have done nothing wrong. The people who came here legally, worked, lived, integrated, and now they're being thrown out. This is insane. So we need to make this very clear. We, the people, do not want law-abiding, legal migrants who've been here for 50 years thrown out of the country for no good reason. That's not what we want. That's not what we want. Exactly. So they have integrated. You know, this is what we're talking about. You know, this is, we can't, the point is that the government has no clue at all of what the people out there are thinking. None at all. None at all.
Westminster. They're not in the real world.
Absolutely not. We don't want decent, law-abiding people who've lived here and paid taxes for years. We don't want them thrown out. What we do want thrown out are illegal immigrants. There's 1 million plus illegal immigrants in this country. Why don't we find them instead of deporting legal immigrants? Have you ever heard anything? We've got 1 million illegal immigrants and the government is throwing out the legal immigrants. You can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. That's the level of incompetence. And real people are suffering. Real
Same
people are
sort of
suffering.
The border force and the police force. So who's going to do the physical work? Getting rid of the illegal immigrants.
Well, who's doing the physical work getting rid of legal immigrants? The point is that the resources are all over the place. We've got plenty of police to monitor Twitter. We've got plenty of police to turn up when some child is misgendered. But we don't have police when a kid's been gang raped down the road. It's all about priorities. The police are screwed up. The whole thing is screwed up because our governance is screwed up. We're governed by idiots. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be controversial when I say that. It's just how I feel. This is idiocy. This is idiocy. You can't throw decent, innocent people out of the country after 40, 50 years while there are 1 million illegal immigrants and 23,000 jihadis. 23,000 jihadis that we know of. And if they're on MI5's list, then they must have done something. So what are they doing here? And don't tell me they're all British citizens. No way are they all British citizens. If they're not, they should be out of this country immediately. Another thing about immigration that the government is so out of sync with the people. We are concerned about jobs being overloaded. So if you have a massive oversupply of labour, of course, wages are going to go down, conditions are going to go back. This is common sense economics. But we're also worried about long-term future of the country by the cultures we're importing. And this is what they won't hear. And this is, again, a distinction we have with the Windrush immigrants who came from the Caribbean, who are very closely connected with Britain in the first place, a long history together, a shared culture. Of course, there are differences, but it's essentially a shared culture in that it is not incompatible. They're Christian. We don't have to get over massive, massive barriers in order to integrate together when we're talking about people from the Caribbean. When we're talking about people from Pakistan, unfortunately, yes, we do have massive, massive cultural and religious barriers to get over in order to live together. And of course, the concept has always been that we must give up our values in order to accommodate Pakistan. And most people in this country think, no. Even if they're okay with people coming from Pakistan, the very least they want is for people from Pakistan to adjust to British ways and not for us to adjust to Pakistani ways, which to us come from the 7th century. And we don't really want to go back to some religious tyranny, nightmare, some dark ages. We don't want to go back to the dark ages. People will throw at me, but the Vatican did this 700 years ago. I said, well, who cares? None of us were around 700 years ago. They're doing it now. You're complaining about what the Vatican did 700 years ago and ignoring what Islam is doing now, which is worse than what the Vatican did 700 years ago. This is the insanity of it all. We don't want completely incompatible cultures coming in to our country. We don't want it. We're not against every person who happens to be an immigrant. We're decent, common sense people. But we know that if you open your borders to a country in which the vast majority of them, for example, mutilate their daughters, as in Somalia, where 98% practice FGM, what are we going to get? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? If you open your borders to Somalia, what are you going to get? You're going to get FGM. You're going to get so much FGM that you can't handle it. So you're going to have to let it happen. And when you let it happen, the law of the land means nothing. British authority on British soil begins to break down, and Britain itself begins to become fractured. And on that, Birmingham may well be the 2017 capital of unemployment. It's also the UK's capital of FGM. And hundreds of new cases of female genital mutilation are discovered in this city every single day. Every single day. This is the FGM capital of the UK. We also know, and I'll bring it a little bit onto the most controversial subject, which is, of course, Islam. Now, just to say a couple of words about Islam. People call us a single issue, blah, blah, blah. They know it's not true. UKIP I'm not here to attack UKIP, but I just want to make the comparison because it's relevant. UKIP is an actual single issue party because it was set up for a single issue. It was set up to get the UK out of the European Union, and it had no other real purpose. I don't think there was any time that UKIP was actually serious about going into seats and actually removing the corrupt establishment. They certainly talked about it, but it was always from an anti-EU perspective. I think UKIP, people say to me all the time, well, you can't possibly succeed under first past the post. If UKIP couldn't, you couldn't, you can't. And I think, but UKIP was never meant to be. This is not the same thing. UKIP, first of all, was seen by many Labour voters, in the north of England especially, as a Tory, as the Tories, as just a new Tories. There were very specific issues that were wrong with UKIP, including the NHS. There was never any clarity from UKIP on their position on the NHS, and this is huge. If you want to really, really work, if you want to really operate in the political market in the UK, you've got to get your message right on the NHS. It's key, especially if you want to break in. And I'm sure there are people in here who have various opinions on the NHS, but for millions, it is the #1 issue when they cast their vote. And they have no one. There is no party in British politics today where a person can safely say, that's the party I trust with the NHS. We have to be it. We have to be it. It's absolutely key. We have to have a new message on the European Union, which I've already explained, which is get rid of the whole thing. We will be friends with our neighbours in Europe. I love Europe. I've lived in a few European countries. I love Europe. Because I love Europe, I hate the European Union. The European Union is destroying Europe. I love France. I love Italy. I toured Italy. The most wonderful holiday I've ever had was the one around Italy, where we saw these beautiful statues and thousands of years of history. And now you see videos of people coming in from the third world and breaking statues, defecating on statues, defecating near statues. I can't be the only one who feels furious about this. I can't be the only one who feels furious about this. We've got to get these things right. We've got to get these things right. So let me sum up. European Union, yes, Brexit. Yes, Brexit. But let's think bigger. Let's think bigger. Let's get rid of the EU altogether. And I think people are receptive to that message because I think people know that Brexit alone is not enough to save us as we know. Brexit will do nothing about the tens of thousands in Calais jumping on trucks. Nothing. Nothing at all. Brexit will do nothing about the thousands coming in to Greece, Italy and Spain every day. And they will make their way to the UK. Of course they will. Brexit will do nothing about the porous open border through the Republic of Ireland either. A very tricky area of Brexit. So Brexit, to me, is merely, I guess, almost that last stand of the British. And the British are the most wonderful people who have made a stand, But that stand needs to be grabbed and brought forward because Brexit itself is not enough. And no one can do this better than the British can. No one can do this better. We can lead a defiance against the European Union, and it can be done. It's creaking. We just need to push it over. Here at home, we need to get the basics right. Sort out the police. Now, I notice that we are coming up to an anniversary of the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Is it the 30th anniversary of the murder of Stephen Lawrence? One thing we have to do, and I said this throughout the UKIP leadership election, and it's something that's going to make us even more unpopular among the elite, but even more popular among the voting public. we should denounce and disown the findings of the Macpherson inquiry into the murder of Stephen Lawrence. And to clarify what they were, they racialised law and order in the UK. After the murder of Stephen Lawrence, the policing changed entirely, and it started to take into account things like the colour of your skin, your religion, what you identify as, sexually speaking. It essentially broke down the idea that we are all equal, individual British citizens, which is what we should be. There should be no hate crime. There should be no hate speech. There should be an equal British citizen, all colours, all religions, all sexes, whatever, under one law, and that is British law. Now, that is the exact opposite of what the Macpherson inquiry said. So, can you imagine what The Guardian will do to a party that said we should disown the recommendations of the Macpherson inquiry into the murder of Stephen Lawrence? No one is going to do that. No one is going to do that. Not in a million years. But we will, because it's the right thing to do. It made a mess of this country. It made a mess of policing in this country. We must get rid of the culture of political correctness, the culture of multiculturalism, and treat every single citizen as an equal citizen, regardless of their colour, regardless of their background. If you're a British citizen, you have the same rights as the one next to you. No more hate crime. No more hate crime. We are all equal, and that's that. And when the lefties start to give you grief about this, that you're a racist, this is the absurdity. And don't be afraid to point it out. They're the racist. We're calling for equal treatment for all people, regardless of race. They're calling for the opposite. Remind them, if you like, about what Martin Luther King said, about how he dreamed of a day when a person would be judged not on the colour of their skin, but on the content of their character. That's what we're arguing for. So Martin Luther King is on our side. And it's not about being sort of getting one over or being snotty. It's the truth. They need to hear this. We need to push this stuff. Another major priority is, for me, schools. Schools are huge. Schools are the future of this country. Absolutely the future of this country. These kids in British schools now are being taught to hate Britain. Nothing less. Taught to hate Britain. The entire history of Britain is colonialism and bloodshed, and Britain never did anything that was worthy of praise. This is what children are being taught. It really is. It really is. And the reason they're being taught that, and the effect of that, is that you're going to have a generation of British self-haters, followed by another generation of British self-haters. And what happens when you hate your own identity? You're certainly not going to defend yourself. The weakening of European people, and I must say this, as controversial as it is, the weakening of white people has been to make us so that we won't fight back against a tyrannical government which intends to change our society beyond all recognition. If you don't love your own country, you won't fight for it. So we've been taught for generations now to hate ourselves, to hate our societies, to hate our country, to hate to hate essentially who we are. And if you hate who you are, then your government can hand over your land to strangers from the other side of the world. And that's exactly what they're doing. And this is particularly pronounced in Britain, in Germany. It's particularly pronounced. Britain and Germany are the top two, I would suggest. France is a different kettle of fish. France, they're still very arrogant about their culture. Good for them. But there's a particular fracturedness in France, which is strange and slightly different from the UK and Germany. But absolutely, German kids are being taught to hate themselves, and German kids are being taught that the only identity of Germany is World War and the Holocaust, of course.
Collective guilt.
Absolutely, and we're born into it. We're born into it. And British children are being told that you have only the empire, and they're never told anything good the empire might have done, by the way. but it's all about the empire. It's never about great inventions. It's never about great authors and great thinkers and great playwrights. And if you look at English history, I mean, have a look at it. Are kids even being taught about great English writers? Do kids even know about William Shakespeare? Do they know about Oscar Wilde, about Dickens, about the Bronte sisters, about Jane Austen? Do they even know? I remember when I was back, this is going back 20 years now, when I was at university, I did a part-time job teaching. I did a journalism degree, and I did a part-time job teaching kids in local primary schools about journalism. And so on one occasion, I discovered that no kid in the class knew who Winston Churchill was or Margaret Thatcher. No child in a class of about 20 of them knew who Winston Churchill or Margaret Thatcher was. And this was a normal, they were, you know, pretty much normal white English class in the Midlands, and they didn't know who Thatcher or Churchill were. There's a problem here. There's a problem here. And I also, and I bring this up more and more because I think about it more and more. If you look at sport, do British kids know that football, cricket, rugby, tennis, golf, I could probably go on, were invented in this country? Do British kids even know this? Do British kids who love football, do they even know that it's England's national game? I don't think they do. No one tells them these things. Do they even know that Shakespeare, if they've heard of Shakespeare, do they even know that Shakespeare was British? Do they even know who invented penicillin or the telephone? Do they know this? They don't, but they should. And we need a national curriculum which tells them so. Yeah. Which tells them so. We will tell the truth about history. No society is an angel. No society can claim angel's wings. British, no different from anyone else. But one thing the British can claim, which others can't, is this remarkable and dramatic influence that Britain has had, and most of it for the better over the last few centuries. Britain is a tiny island which has shaped the world. And its kids need to know that. Its kids need to know that. They need a bit of self-confidence. Boys in particular, I think, are suffering with a serious self-confidence issue. British kids are not being taught any self-respect, respect for themselves, respect for their community, respect for work. What I want to bring back in, one, I want the National Union of Teachers out on their ear. How dare they defy the government on what they should be teaching children? The teachers' unions are a joke. They're all Marxist, hard left nightmares. Get rid of them. The idea that they have influence over the teaching of Britain's children is actually frightening to me. Get rid of them. Get rid of them. If you go onto the National Union of Teachers website, you'll see they've got all this pro-Hamas stuff. What the hell has that got to do with teaching kids in the UK? Why are you writing pro-Hamas documents on the website? This is it. It's absolutely shocking. And they are pro-immigration and they are pro-Islam and they are absolutely no shame with any of it. Get them out. Get them out. Politics, other than teaching history and objective truths about political ideologies, teachers should not be bringing their political views into the classroom. Nor should they be bringing their sexuality into the classroom. You go in and you teach children how to work, how to function, how to earn a living, how to pay respects to their neighbours, to themselves, and to their country. This is what we ought to be teaching children, and nothing else. Their views on homosexuality or transgenderism or any of the rest of it is not for the state classroom. Let's produce working people who know how to function as grown-ups in a capitalist economy and know how to work. That's what we need to do. Get back to basics. Get these children ready for work. Nothing else. No imposing opinions on them. The armed forces is another issue very close to my heart. I'm astonished by the fact that there are British soldiers who don't feel safe walking down the streets of this country in their uniform. I'm astonished by that, truly astonished by that. And you don't even have to be a military, you can even be a pacifist and still see that that's wrong. You can be a pacifist and still see that that's wrong. These are people who knowingly put their lives on the line in defense of their country. And for very little money as well. You know, the soldiers who go out, who are deployed out to the likes of Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and elsewhere, they're not paid very much. They're not paid very much. Now, my thinking, and some have disagreed with me on this, and we'll as a party, this is one of the things I want the party members to vote on. My personal thinking is that the defence budget should be doubled. That's what I think. The defence budget should be doubled. It's currently 2% of GDP. I think it should be 4%. I think it should be 4%. That's probably on the higher side, but I do. Because I think that the number one priority of a government must be to keep its people safe. It must be, must be. And the people who join up to the military are doing so out of loyalty to their country, out of desire to protect their country. So let's let them do their job. And that doesn't mean sending them off to messy wars, which we have no real reason to be in. We are being run by people who don't know what they're doing. And well, they do know what they're doing, but the problem is that they're guided by the relationships they've got with various people from various countries. So it's all about the friendships they've got and the business relationships and the political relationships they've got with leaders from that country and the leaders from that country, because they live in a bubble of leaders. And to them, it's a game. It's all about trading this off against that, and they're watching each other, and you know, it's almost like gambling. So, well, I'll put that if he puts that and they put that. That's what it's like. And when it's on a global stage, they're still doing the same thing. It's like I described earlier. They're playing chess, but people's lives are hundreds of thousands of people's lives is what they're actually playing chess with. But it makes no difference because they're playing chess anyway. What is needed is genuinely no less than a people's, and I don't want to sound like a communist when I say this, it is a people's pushback. It is a people's, people's revolution that is needed. Not a communist revolution, but a people's one. We don't want a communist society. We're actually opposing a communist society. We don't want this tyranny. We want to be able to say whatever we like. We want to have a press which reports the truth about what politicians say. We want to have schools where our kids are taught to work and function in society and not to be Marxist drones. We want a police which actually confronts and prevents and prosecutes crime. Prosecutes being the key word here. Because the Marxists have, of course, changed criminal law so that the perpetrator is as much a victim as the victim. And this is that kind of taking society and throwing everything up in the air so nobody quite knows where they are anymore. Moral clarity is disappeared because of this. And you will see it reflected, particularly when the perpetrator isn't white. You will see it reflected, you will see understanding and tolerance and of why they did what they did. And we must take into account the background they have. And no one gives a damn about the victim. You know, it's all about the perpetrator. It's all about what disadvantages the perpetrator may have had. And what about the victim? You know, criminal law isn't just about, it is about punishment, but it's also about restoration and the restoration of the importance of the victim. Just to give you an example, going back a few years, when I was a law student, I did months and months and months clerking in criminal courts. And you would see people, you would see victims of crimes who had been victims of violent crime, who had no idea how important they were, if you like. How do I phrase this? If the judge would send the perpetrator to jail, you could see the self-confidence or self-esteem, if you like, of the victim rising. You could see it because they felt important again. because the judge had considered them so important that a crime against them was worthy of sending someone to prison. And you can see that self-confidence coming back in the victim of the crime. And that is really, that is largely forgotten when we talk about crime. The victim of the crime is largely forgotten. It's always about the perpetrator. Now, I'm not a person who wants people, tarred and feathered, but I do want people punished. And I do want the responsibility put where it belongs. This person has done wrong. This person has not done wrong. Let's clarify this. And when we clarify this, and we make the judges clarify this, then the country will know where our morals stand. Britain at this moment has no idea who it is. Its morals are dead. We don't know who we are. We don't know who we are. We're allowing people to rape and mutilate children and let them get away with it. And that leaves us wondering, what are our morals after all? I thought we decided that it was wrong, terribly, terribly wrong, to rape children. And now we're letting people get away with it en masse. So who are we? Who are we? We have no moral clarity. And one of the things that the British people are desperately waiting for is some clarity on right and wrong. Right and wrong. It is wrong to rape a child. We will tolerate it not. And if you do it, you will be serving at least 20 years in prison, at least. And there will be no good behavior, there will be no, you will pay, A, to send a message to society that we will not tolerate this, and B, to let that child who was raped know that he or she matters. This is important. We need to find our morals again. We need to understand who is the victim and who is the perpetrator, and we need to stop this disgusting Orwellian twisting of our morals and find who we are again. And who we are is a democracy who loves our country and our culture and who will protect it from all dangers, including immigration, and it is a threat to British culture. Of course, we're not talking about a woman from Spain living down the street. Come on. We're talking about mass movement of people from completely incompatible societies to our own. We're not talking about a few people moving around. People are always going to move around. We don't hate people. I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, "Why, you hate immigrants." And I think, oh, for God's sake, how childish can you be? It sounds to me like, no, you hate immigrants. That's what it sounds like. Of course I don't hate immigrants. Don't be stupid. We're not talking about hating immigrants. We're talking about mass movement of people, unwanted by the people in the host society. And it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. So to finish, and I don't know how long I've been talking. I've got 10 to 9. Okay, I really do have to finish. To finish, I've been a bit scattery, actually. I've sort of jumped from topic to topic. But I do want to say thank you all and for supporting. Look, I honestly believe we can do this. I would not be doing this if I didn't. I really wouldn't. And it's not because I think I'm some sort of genius and some sort of messiah. I'm not. But I know in my gut, I can feel it. I can see it every time I pick up a paper. I can see it every time I look on Twitter or Facebook. I know the majority, the decent majority in this country thinks exactly what I'm thinking. I know it. And it's not like that Tory phrase from a few years ago. Do you remember that one? Are you thinking what we're thinking? Do you remember that one? It's not like that. It's not a political soundbite. I really mean it. We are at the right time. It's the right message. And don't be afraid of the Islam thing. We'll get this thrown at us. And I think I tried to mention this area earlier, and then I went off on a tangent. Don't be afraid of it either. We'll be told that you're a one-issue, blah, yada, yada. Of course we're not. Anyone who pays the slightest bit of attention knows we're not. But Islam is still the one that is going to single us out. And the reason it's going to single us out is because people will trust us because of it. Nobody in politics, and I include UKIP, will say what needs to be said about Islam. And what needs to be said about Islam is that we're not talking about terrorism. Yes, we all know it's only a minority who support terrorism, but terrorism's not the problem. It's the culture. It's the beliefs, it's the religion itself. And we're bringing this en masse, and it is having a profoundly negative effect on our society. And we want no more of it. And the only answer is to stop, I'm afraid to say, stop immigration from Muslim societies. That is what almost half the country wants. And if they knew the truth, we'd be into 70+%. I have no doubt about it. So we need to get people to that 70+%. I'm not going to go out, I don't want us to go out and pick on innocent Muslims. There will be no crimes against Muslims in the streets. I will not tolerate anyone going out and beating up women in the streets for a headscarf or anything else. But we will not have the Islamization of our society. We will not have it. And Muslims, moderate or otherwise, need to understand that we will not become an Islamic society. We will stay British. We will maintain our freedom of speech. We will mock, satirize, and criticize whatever the hell we like. And no one gets to come into this country and tell the British people what they can do. And I shall leave it at that. So thank you for coming along.